Docente alla Freie Universität di Berlino e ricercatrice presso il Carnegie Russia Center, sempre di Berlino.
Да. Это политолог, известный на мировом уровне. И,
E Caterina è una delle analiste più importanti, una delle voci più seguite nel mondo russofono, con oltre 1 milione di iscritti sul suo canale YouTube, è una delle voci più ascoltate per analizzare la società russa, anche voglio dire, a distanza a milioni di persone, nonostante la repressione, nonostante la censura, nonostante l'esilio. E la sua presenza oggi per noi qui è un grande privilegio.
Для нас является огромной привилегией то, что сегодня с нами Екатерина Шульман, которая является одним из самых значимых голосов и популярных голосов в российской оппозиции, и которая вносит огромный вклад в борьбу с путинским режимом.
Accanto a lei Maxim Kurnikov, giornalista del settimanale tedesco Bild e di Ego Online, che raccoglie un po' l'eredità di Ego Mosky, chiuso dal regime ormai nel 2022.
И рядом с Екатериной Шульман находится Максим Курников. Это журналист радио «Эхо Москвы», которое было закрыто из-за своей позиции против режима.
Entrambi quindi, nonostante la lontananza dei loro paesi, continuano a informare sulla società russa anche attraverso un programma settimanale chiamato Status, che va in onda su Ego Online e sul settimanale tedesco proprio Bild.
Да. И оба продолжают информировать русскоязычную публику о происходящем с помощью программы «Статус», которая выходит на YouTube.
Con loro anche Daria Kryukova, rifugiata politica rappresentante della comunità dei russi liberi in Italia, e Anna Alexandrova, attivista del movimento Russi contro la guerra.
С нами также Дарья Крюкова, она беженка политическая, и она представляет здесь организацию «Руси Либери», свободные русские. И также здесь я, Анна Александрова, представитель Russi contro la guerra, русские против войны.
Quindi in tempi in cui appunto il significato dell'incontro di stasera è proprio per sottolineare il fatto che, nonostante appunto in tempi in cui la propaganda prova a diciamo così soffocare ogni voce contraria, ascoltare la dissidenza russa è un dovere democratico, non solo perché ci ricorda da che parte stare, ma anche perché ci ricorda che non può essere un intero popolo a pagare spesso le scelte scellerate di un governo autoritario.
И в то время как пропаганда пытается задушить голоса российской оппозиции, российских диссидентов, важно дать им возможность донести свою позицию, и в том числе до людей, которых lишают возможности, народ, который лишает возможности получать адекватную информацию.
Un grazie sincero anche al senatore Filippo Sensi, da sempre vicino a chi lotta per la libertà, che ha fortemente voluto questa iniziativa. 2 note pratiche e lascio la parola.
Итак, я бы очень хотела поблагодарить от всей души также сенатора Филиппа Сенси, который очень вовлечен в борьбу за свободу и благодаря которому была возможность организовать это мероприятие.
2 note pratiche, come dicevo prima, l'evento dovrà concludersi entro le ore 20 per permettere ai collaboratori della Camera di chiudere la sala in tempi consoni, magari anche una manciata di minuti prima, e l'evento, come avete visto, sarà tradotto.
Небольшие практические замечания. Мероприятие должно быть завершено до 20:00 и, возможно, даже на несколько минут раньше, для того, чтобы мы могли освободить помещение.
Ora lascio la parola a Filippo per un paio di saluti? No? Ok, quindi saltiamo i saluti. Chiedo agli ospiti di rimanere cortesemente nei 2 minuti per dare a Ekaterina e Maxim tutto lo spazio necessario per il loro intervento. Grazie mille.
Bene. Buonasera a tutti, io mi chiamo Daria, io faccio parte della comunità dei Russi Liberi in Italia. vi rubo giusto 2 minuti per poter presentare i nostri ospiti come noi li vediamo, noi russi. Ekaterina Schulman, come già è stato detto, uno dei politologhi più frequentati dai russi, ma in più io direi che per noi rappresenta un'informazione davvero molto preziosa sul regime russo, sugli eventi che si succedono in Russia, e in più per noi rappresenta pure diciamo una luce della speranza, perché è vero che ha più di 1 milione di iscritti sul suo canale YouTube, e uno dei video più visti nel suo canale si chiama Come possiamo sopravvivere questo? Cioè, è stato registrato quasi subito dopo l'inizio della guerra, come noi possiamo sopravvivere questo. Quindi per noi è molto importante anche da questo punto di vista. Maxim Kurnikov invece, come è stato detto, non solo un giornalista di Eco Moskwy, che è stato chiuso dal regime 1 o 2 settimane dopo l'inizio della guerra, anche se è stato aperto più di 25 anni fa, nel 1990, una radio storica che è stata chiusa subito dopo, ma poi quasi tutti i giornalisti sono emigrati e hanno ripreso quel media in esilio, e adesso Eco esiste in esilio, e loro riprovano a fare tutto in esilio. E io personalmente apprezzo non solo il suo lavoro di giornalista, che secondo me è uno dei giornalisti più brillanti della Russia moderna, ma anche il suo lavoro da manager, che sta facendo le attività davvero difficili, perché voi potete capire che tutti i loro ascoltatori si trovano in Russia, però dalla Russia questi media indipendenti russi non possono essere finanziati, non dalle società russe né dagli ascoltatori privati, perché è vietato, perché tutti loro sono dichiarati organizzazioni estremiste, indesiderate, eccetera. Quindi si sono inventati alcuni metodi di finanziamento all'estero per poter dare informazione così preziosa, informazione indipendente, soprattutto ai russi, quelli che si trovano in Russia. E questo compito è davvero non ha prezzo per me. Quindi io vi ho dato un po' di quadro, cosa loro rappresentano per noi. Grazie.
Итак, хорошо, я кратко перескажу, или тогда по-итальянски? Va bene, d'accordo. Allora, io da parte mia vorrei dire che Ekaterina Schulman per noi tutti rappresenta è una figura molto importante, perché no, è un breve discorso. Quindi rappresenta una figura ibrida molto importante, perché da una parte è una figura accademica di riferimento anche per tutti gli universitari, credo, perché la libertà accademica in Russia viene repressa sistematicamente, e Ekaterina Schulman è una di quelle voci che da una parte è una figura che rappresenta appunto la ricerca accademica libera dai vincoli del regime, e dall'altra parte è anche una forma di attivismo in sé, opporsi al regime e dire quello che pensi anche sul piano della ricerca. E vorrei dire che questa unione, diciamo, con Maxim Kurnikov ha avuto un enorme successo tra il pubblico generale, che non ha nulla a che fare tante volte con il mondo universitario, proprio perché c'è questo ibridismo tra l'accademia, e quindi nozioni accademiche, la divulgazione scientifica per quanto riguarda le scienze sociali e le scienze politiche, e al tempo stesso una comprensione di quello che sta succedendo effettivamente in Russia, dei metodi del regime e della politica internazionale. Grazie.
Grazie mille a te. Ekaterina, Maxim, the floor is yours.
I have a small proposal to make. If we don't have that much time, maybe it will save time for simultaneous translation if we'd be speaking English. But if that's so, you agree? Excellent, very well. So thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. My two favorite places in every country are universities and parliaments, so I try to visit them whenever I have an opportunity. We have just returned from a meeting at the University of Naples, And here we are, being invited to Parliament in Rome, which is, again, a great honor and opportunity. A few words about the way I see my own role and the position from which I speak. I would not see myself as an oppositional figure per se, as a political activist. I have a dual role, first as an expert and a university teacher, and while being denied the possibility of working in my own country, I still continue my expert research on my subject, which is, generally speaking, decision-making in autocracies, more specifically legislative process. So I watch the changing norms in Russia and the way Russian political system evolves and adapts itself to changing circumstances. And this is a subject that I teach currently at a Freie University in Berlin. And second, I am a kind of public speaker, as has been mentioned. Right now, if I'm correct in understanding whatever of Italian I've been able to understand. So such results of my research and such of my qualified opinions and educated guesses as I think are worth sharing with the public, I do try to share with the public. We do have a regular weekly program status that has been going on since 2017, every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Moscow time. No matter what happens, we still try to continue doing it. We'll be doing it tomorrow at Milan with a live audience, which is also a thing we do from time to time. So, given that, and given the 5-minute scope that I have before we start the Q&A part, these are the things that I want to share with you. I can understand that during the last 3 years, you perhaps have been tired of hearing of too many crucial moments or decisive points in this war. But right now, I suspect that we have come to another of the crossroads, of which there have been a few previously. I am not a specialist in foreign policy per se, but I can't help perceiving that an attempt to stop the war by talking has not quite succeeded. Perhaps this will convince the general public and the decision makers alike that there are no simple ways of ending the war and that you can't possibly invent some sort of conversation that will miraculously convince an aggressor that aggression is not in their interest. That, unfortunately, for all of us, has been proved to be impossible. That means that the war is not going to stop tomorrow. What we perceive on the ground is rather escalation than otherwise. This is an unfortunate reality that we are dealing with. I'm watching the Russian political system, as I said, in the various stages of its evolution. It is trying to produce an impression of possessing limitless resources, financial, human, and otherwise, and also of having all the time in the world at its disposal. Unlike democracies which are tied to electoral cycles, autocracies generally do have the easier time in both making and implementing decisions for which they are not answerable, because they are not answerable to their electorate, there not being any. This is partially true, but as with every successful propaganda campaign, there's about 25% of reality in it, and the rest is make-believe. Russian system has proven itself to be adaptive and resilient. Part of this adaptivity is due to its having the advantage of a partially market economy. Resilience in resisting sanctions have been, again, mostly due to the fact that this is not a Soviet system. This is not a state monopoly. There is a sector of competitive market economy, and this has been beneficial to the system in its quest for survival. However, its economic resources are not limitless, nor are the human resources it possesses itself of. It being what it is, I mean the system being what it is, an authoritarian one, not the ideologically driven one. It is very wary and really unwilling to resort to mass mobilization. It is not good at mobilizing people. It's good at frightening them, bribing them, and deceiving them. These are the three most popular instruments. So the human resources for this war has been bought rather than mobilized. And the price is rising with every passing month, which means that the previous level of payment is no longer enough. To generally increase its military impact, and again, here I'm putting my foot on a really shaky ground because I'm not a military expert, but it's evident from the speed of the movement, of the progress that the Russian forces are making, that to really accelerate that process, they need either to mobilize much more people, or, as I think Russia's hope is, to so demoralize Ukrainian society and Ukrainian leadership that the resistance falls apart. This chain of reasoning doesn't lead us to anything concrete. I don't have a recipe for you. I don't have a silver bullet with which to stop a war, much less to win the war. The very terms of winning and losing becoming so much more blurred in the modern context than previously. We tend to think by using historical analogies. So we tend to project the experience of the 20th century on every other military conflict. But the two world wars have been rather unique than typical. We don't have reasons to believe this war will end in decisive victory for either side. However, again, it's not for me to give you advice, but in the context of protracted military conflict, safety, security, sovereignty, military, economic, informational, and otherwise becomes crucial. It is now evident that this is rather a long game, and that resistance and resilience are more important than, again, inventing miracle cures for deep-rooted conflicts. One would love to see a miracle cure, but that doesn't seem to be the realistic perspective. So again, the best advice that perhaps a citizen of our country can give to other countries is fortify yourself. Not in order to engage in a conflict, but in order to prevent being drawn into it under the impression of your own unpreparedness. So it gives me no pleasure to be saying this at all. Militarization is bad for societies. Resources spent on military goals have much better be spent on anything that is beneficial to people. But it's all very well to say, let's not spend this money on military, let's spend it on healthcare and education. But this may only lead to your educating and making healthy the people who will get killed in the foreseeable future. So again, sorry for not living up to my optimistic reputation, but perhaps some more optimism will occur during the Q&A part. But this is what I wanted to tell you while I have the chance.
And I should say a few words about Russian society and information and Russian independent media which are working in exile. As far as Reporters Without Borders counted, there are more than 70 different independent media working on Russian from abroad. It means it's not just several media, it's a media system which is working for those who speak Russian and mostly live in Russia. If we are talking about the Echo, the media outlet I work, approximately 5 from 60 to 80% of our audience is inside of Russia. It means that there are a lot of people in Russia who really need the information. If you do not see the protests in Russia, it doesn't mean there is no protest in Russia. For these 3 years, thousands and thousands of people were arrested and get to the prison because they were protesting. Thousands and thousands of people were arrested or had a court and had different results in this court if they wrote something in internet. If we are talking about last days, the previous week we had a court in St. Petersburg where the woman, 84 years old, had a decision that she's guilty, saying bad words about Russian army. She said only, "I'm the child of the war and I don't want the war. Stop the war." That's the only she said. And hundreds and hundreds of people went to the court and were applauding her in this court. It means that every week and maybe every day we have more or less different actions that shows that there are a lot of people in Russia who are not supporting what's going on in Russia, and they need information. And that's our purpose, that's our goal, to give this information to them. Still, we have more or less free internet in Russia. They block our sites and so on, but still we have opportunities to give the information to Russian audience inside of Russia. And I should say, when we are now talking with the journalists in different countries, they now need our experience. We never thought that we would have any questions from American journalists, and now we have. So I think that this connection to big part of Russian-speaking audience inside of Russia, and Reporters Without Borders counted that every week from 6 to 9 million people inside of Russia reading news from the outlets which are working from abroad. I think we have a really important goal to save this to save this broadcasting to this audience, this bridge to the audience, which I think will help in the future if you want to see Russia and Belarus and other countries like that more peaceful, I should say. Because if we will not now inform this audience, that would be I think that it would be very difficult to save their courage, their understanding of what is normal and what is not. So I hope that all the circumstances which we have now will not stop this bridge between us, and I hope that we can speak with this audience quite effectively. So, your questions?
Grazie Caterina, grazie Maxim per la vostra testimonianza. Non so se gli altri nostri ospiti vogliono aggiungere qualcosa, Daria, Anna, a quello che è già stato detto, altrimenti passerei la palla al pubblico a questo punto, se ci sono domande, osservazioni, commenti.
I would like to thank Filippo Sensi and Lia Quartapelle for having organized this event, and I mean also because it's very important to organize chances to have Russians speaking about Russia in Italy. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Andrea Romano. I used to be a member of parliament for the same party of Filippo Sensi, and now I teach Russian history at the University of Roma Tor Vergata, so I am a scholar of Russia. And of course, Russia is one of my main interests. And what I would like to tell you, and then I have a question for you, for Professor Schulman in particular. It's important to have Russians speaking about Russia, because quite too often the public discussion in Italy is so much poisoned about by this, tragedy of the war. There, I hear quite too often the point that there is a kind of guilt, collective guilt by Russia and by Russians, which is of course not the case. My question to Professor Schulman is the following, and by the way, I am a big fan of your work and also of your courage, if I may say. I do share your points about the non-existence of a miracle cure, and also the other point about the fact that Putin didn't mobilize the Russian society, but better it bought the Russian society. Nevertheless, the point that I would like to raise to your attention is when we think about possible alternatives to the regime, we know on one side that Russian history has shown us how often alternatives came up, even if they were not so visible before. No, you have plenty of examples of this. My questions to you is, I know it's difficult, I know there is no miracle cure, but nevertheless, if you could, foresee in a matter of 5 to 10 years, how would you say that the situation of inner opposition in Russia is now, in this year, and is going to develop in the next years? So what is the situation of, again, the political alternatives to the regime? If there are any alternatives, do you think that they are going to, to be visible sooner or later? I know this is a difficult question, but this is a big chance to have your opinion on that. Thank you.
Yes, it is a difficult one, but I'll try to tackle it. Alternatives to political regimes become both visible and important in a revolutionary situation. If you have a regime collapse and regime change, which happens from time to time, it also happens to autocracies, especially to personalized models that have this core weakness. They are centered on a person, and no person is immortal, and lacking institutions, laws, rules, and practices, they have to begin all over again. So when the leader dies, the window of opportunity opens. But even in that situation, again, although cases of regime collapse are known, what happens more often is rather regime evolution. You have mentioned Russian history. It's a pretty long one, so we can get facts for every theory out there. But throughout Russian history, its ruling class, its elite, has time and again found itself in a situation where they have the great leader that has made conquests, that has put the country back on Europe's political map, but who has also not just enslaved the population, but also repressed or killed or more or less subjugated the elites themselves. Ivan the Terrible did it. Peter I did it. Joseph Stalin did it. I'm not saying that we are quite in this situation right now. The elites have it easy due to the general progress of humanity. So the killing off of the elites is not now the order of the day, although intra-elite repressions are on the rise and have been on the rise ever since the end of the last presidential election campaign, electoral event, as we call it. So arrests and redistribution of assets, deprivatization, these are things that worry Russian elites much more than the war does, surprising as it may seem to the outside audiences. So when this great leader disappears for whatever reasons, elites usually try to find a solution to staying the elites, to remaining in their privileged position, but having such kind of regime that will not kill them and their families, that will not make them servants of the state to such a great extent. Look at what happened after Stalin's death. Soviet regime remained itself in all its main parameters. But it was never the same as it was under Stalin's time. Mass repression, full-scale war, regular hunger, pyramid-like building projects that demanded mass sacrifice. These were not repeated during all the next decades that Soviet regime yet had to live. This is not what you perhaps expect to hear when asking about an alternative, because this doesn't look like an alternative. This looks like a gradual evolution. But as a political scientist, I must say that this kind of scenario happens much more often than the dramatic and spectacular collapses or revolutions. If we are looking at a perspective of 5 to 10 years, and these are very good figures, because this is exactly the time when the Russian ruling elite, which is now age 70 plus, will start to put it mildly, to erode. And the problem of transfer of power, transfer of assets, transfer of positions from the current elites to their children and sometimes to their grandchildren is still as much of a problem as it was in the end of the previous decade, when these conversations about transfer first started to emerge. No solution have been even proposed. They still have no guarantees of their property, their assets, their freedom, and their life itself. Previously, Russian elites could use external institutions to achieve those guarantees which they denied to the people at home and which were denied to them too. But war has made them much more isolated. War has enriched them, but has made their quality of life lower. It happens sometimes. When you get more money, but less comfort and less safety. Of course, they can remove their families and their assets to Dubai or to Turkey, but these are not the same. This is not the same as moving to London. In Dubai, motherland will get you, because it's always easier for one autocrat to cooperate with another where there is no rule of law. So they're facing this problem. And the fact that they're facing this problem and are coming to realize it is perhaps more of an opening to some future conversation with them from the outside world than anything you might be looking for in the form of a protest movement. If you have the misfortune of facing a solidified and highly repressive autocracy, you won't have a protest movement. You will have a widespread dissatisfaction, but it will take the form, as it does take this form in Russia today, of passivity, increased use of alcohol, increased use of antidepressants, and other signs and markers of social malaise that we are witnessing. Again, this is not something new, nor is it unique to Russia. There's a classic work called Weapons of the Weak. It's about resistance of the powerless. Resistance of the powerless quite often takes the form of self-harm in various, again, forms and ways. So, do not waste your time looking for subterranean protests, partisan networks, or something of that kind. Resistance happens, but it happens much more often in the forms described by Maxim, as something that will not result in immediate arrest. People can't afford the risk, although even people who visit courtrooms know that this is not safe. They will be videotaped, their faces will be recognized, their names will be on the list. Police
they show passport to go to the court, so yeah. They are all marked.
Yeah, you don't even need facial recognition technology. They just have a passport. So they know that there is a risk, but still they're running this risk. These people are our audience. Our audience, again, perhaps I'm speaking more for myself, is also the second level of Russian bureaucracy, the level just below the highest one. I've been on civil state service myself for quite a number of years. These people are my colleagues. I will not go into the moral dimension of the question, why are they still serving the state and how are they explaining this, etc. It's the problem of technocrats. It is also quite well researched. But these people are both the mainstay of the regime. They are the ones that keep the country running. They are the ones that keep the system functional. At the same time, they are the least protected and the least privileged among, of course, among the generally protected and privileged nomenclatura of the country. But they are easy prey to the Siloviki. They are the first targets. And they're not happy about it. They're not doing anything about it. They are adapting. We are all adapting. Perhaps we are too adaptive for our own good. But they are the audience. And they are the people who desire rather the change of the status quo than the preservation of the status quo. And this, after all, is the key question, whether you invest in keeping the things the way they are, or whether you passively or actively want them to change.
Grazie ancora Caterina. No, prego.
Yeah, Nona Michelides, Senior Fellow at the Institute of International Affairs, a think tank based here in Rome. First of all, thank you for your speech and more generally for the work you are carrying out over the years already. I have two questions. One regard, you spoke about the sanctions and how Russia has been resilient in the context of sanctions, but still, do you think that somehow the oil prices could influence Russian calculus in the war? And second question regards the possibility of the enlargement of the war, in the sense that we are in a context where Trump's administration is mounting anti-European rhetoric, Pentagon declaring that the US doesn't want to be a primary guarantor of European security. So I was wondering how far such statements and more generally Trump's policy towards Europe, towards Ukraine, is reinforcing the Kremlin's perception that now it is time actually to test Article 5 of the NATO and somehow to provoke one of the Baltic states. Many would argue that Russia failed to prevail in Ukraine, so wouldn't have no forces to attack the NATO, but then we are in a modern warfare era where with drones you can easily provoke the country just to test whether the Trump's administration will run to help its partners, and the objective in this case would not be to occupy a large territory, but rather to demonstrate that the NATO is actually over.
Thank you. Both these questions are actually outside of my sphere of competence, but I will try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. I'm not an expert on sanctions, but if I understand correctly, what the aim of sanction policy anywhere is, it is not to affect regime change, or not even to change regime behavior, but to impose a price on the next steps. So you do not, again, I don't think you can rationally expect that sanctions will make a country turn around and act in the way opposite to the one it's been acting. But you want to demonstrate and to practically prove that every next step in the same direction will cost you more. And in this, if we understand sanctions in this regard, then they have been effective. Yes, you can buy things that you need for your military machine, but you have to pay 4 times the price. Can you afford 4 times the price? Well, at the moment, you can. But it is certainly an additional burden on a system that has already got itself into a situation it was not prepared for. A protracted, so-called kinetic war with a comparably sized opponent. So, oil prices. Yes, there is a correlation quite often observed in the behavior of so-called petrocracies, authoritarian regimes whose main resource is oil and gas. But again, this correlation, let me try to explain it because it's often incorrectly understood. When oil price falls below a certain level, it is not said that autocracies stop being aggressive, but they become less aggressive than their non-petrocratic neighbors. And if the oil price is above a certain level, they are more aggressive than their non-petrocratic neighbors. And these prices, again, figures don't mean much because prices change. But generally, the estimation is $77 per barrel. Above that, you get more aggressive than your peers. And $36 per barrel. Lower than that, you get less aggressive than your peers. In between, you are average. So much for dependence on oil prices. This is also not a silver bullet. I know people are fond of simple correlations, like look at the graph showing oil price and look at Soviet Union collapse. Soviet Union collapsed for a number of reasons. And most of these reasons and those factors were internal rather than external. This is true of any country, especially of a country as large as Russia. It is important to itself. Things that are happening inside are of paramount weight as compared to any external factor out there. If, again, we are not expecting anyone to occupy Russia. No one is fool enough for that. So much for oil prices. If there is a protracted period of low oil prices, this will not change the nature of the current Russian regime, but it will make it less prone to new aggressive actions. And this leads us to my trying to answer your second question, which should actually be addressed to military experts. The scenario that you are describing doesn't strike me as impossible. There is nothing physically impossible in Russia launching a symbolic attack on a NATO country in order to test the validity of Article 5. The thing is, with all due respect to the innovations introduced by American administration, still, I don't quite see what Russia will get out of it. If there is an attack, there will be an answer. No one expects this answer to be the raising down of Moscow or bombing of the Kremlin, but possibly there will be a response. So what then? What are we left with then? Even India and Pakistan managed to somehow avoid downright hostilities. So there's a blow, and there's a return blow, and then what then? Will Russian forces march on Tallinn? Again, in politics, nothing is impossible but what is impossible physically, and that is not impossible physically. But frankly, I perceive much more benefits to Russia from the continuous discussion of such a possibility than from the realization of this scenario. But maybe there are some finer points in the military tactics that I'm missing here.
I have a few words to add. First of all, I'm not economist, and I should say that we are as a journalist, and you are as an expert, and those who are making decisions are lucky because a lot of elite from Russia, from 90s, from zeros, are now left Russia, and they understand how Russian economy works and what sanctions are painful, what are not. You know, previous people who were working in a very high position in central bank, even owners of the biggest Russian oil companies, they are all on the West right now, and they are all give us interviews and telling what sanctions are painful and what are not. And they say that, of course, there are some very successful sanctions. And of course, what is connected to oil prices are more successful than not. But still, Russia has opportunities to sell oil to the other markets. Gas, not. Oil, yes. And more of that, they say every time when European Union has a new package of sanctions, they say that's a pity that there are new sanctions because it would be much better if previous were working. Because when you are trying to put in sanction list 8,000 numbers of some goods, it means that you have no just enough bureaucracy to check it. And that's why it becoming not working. And really, I think that they are a good people who can, I mean, good people to ask about that better than us. And one more thing, the second question. Maybe you know, if you're working with foreign policy and Russia, Sergei Karaganov, a politologist who has a flat in Venezia, a nice flat with 2 stages as far as I remember. He loves Italy. He even had his special license to kill, I don't know how they call these birds, pheasants in Pisa. Yeah, in Pisa. So we were reading his reports, which he was making for Kremlin and for those who are working there with questions of war. They really have a plan to make Europeans not to be sure that the fifth article will work. They really want all of us be thinking about that. How they wrote it like, does United States will start, do we think that United States will start the nuclear war because of Narva, the small city on Estonian and Russian border? So it doesn't mean they're not prepared to check it, but they really want us to think about it and be very skeptical on the point that fifth article is working. I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but as far as I remember from these blackmail things, he even get Italian visa after February 22. I don't know if he used it, maybe not, but he get. So he has a flat. I understand that it may be even a good purpose for that. I know that one German member of parliament bought a flat in Moscow last year, and he's going to Moscow because he needs to pay the bills on the flat. Really. So I think if we are talking about sanctions and about this policy, we should understand that it would be very nice if the sanctions we have were much more smart. We have European countries have enough bureaucracy to watch work. Is it work or not? And I think really you have a very good experts here, especially those who were working with Russian regime previous years, to consult them in these questions.
Grazie Caterina, grazie Maxim. Forse abbiamo tempo per un'altra domanda? Prego.
Io mi chiamo Олесь, faccio la domanda in 2 lingue, in ucraino и in руссо. Меня зовут Олесь, я украинец. Я задам вопрос на 2 языках. Вы уже 11 лет Российская Федерация ведет войну, 3 года геноцида украинского народа. И эта война, она поддерживает политическую жизнь Путина. Как на ваше мнение, не надо ли объединиться всей российской оппозиции, чтобы ну, как эту смерть Кощея найти, и чтобы все-таки Путина унести с пьедестала, как раз объединяясь с украинцами и рассказывая россиянам правду, называя вещи своими именами, потому что очень часто как бы нормализуется эта война, потому что говорится о всем и не подчеркивается убийство, депортации, тюрьма. И как вы думаете, возможно ли объединение российской оппозиции? Потому что очень много людей называют себя оппозиционерами, например, госпожа Латынина, которая есть империалистка, она тоже говорит, что она оппозиционерка. Вот этот мой вопрос. La domanda era questa. La guerra, cioè da 11 anni Putin fa la guerra e 3 anni in Bondovisione fa il massacro e il genocidio del popolo ucraino. E questa guerra continua la vita politica di Putin. Secondo lei non sarebbe corretto per l'opposizione russa unirsi diciamo, davanti a questa idea di appoggio dell'Ucraina e chiamare le cose con il proprio nome, uccisioni, deportazioni, torture, violenze, per appunto poter delegitimizzare Putin, perché si parla di tutto e questa guerra entra, si normalizza, si cerca di fare una specie di normalità. E se lei crede nella unione dell'opposizione, perché ci sono varie frazioni e anche una signora imperialista latina si dichiara opposizione a Putin. Grazie.
You want me to start? Okay. I should say that most of Russian independent media who left the country are writing about the Ukrainian war and all these terrible things that's going there, and of course about deportation of the children, and of course about the killings of civil people, and of course about the war crimes, and of course about all these things. And I should say that audience in Russia, you know, there is a myth that audience in Russia is not reading it, don't want to know about it. No, they're reading it, and you know, they have another feeling. They cannot do anything about that. And that, of course, very hard feeling that you know that your country is doing something really wrong, but you can't influence on that. So that's why we see so many people who even protest in the country where the protest is a crime. More of that, if we are talking about these practices, which you called genocide, it's a really hard question, yeah, about how to write about it and how to make people to know that, for example, taking children from Ukrainian territories and taking them without their parents and teaching them that they are now not Ukrainians, they are Russians, is a type of this process. That's really hard to sometimes to explain, because when we are talking about genocide, we sometimes are thinking about other processes and so on. But we are trying to, and I'm personally, I was in the United Nations sections about the rights of children, and there was a report about that, and we were talking about that too. And if we are talking about opposition leaders, you know, I'm a part of media, and I think that the process we have now is something quite normal. More of that. When we say opposition, what do we see? Opposition is, I think Ekaterina says about this much more than me, but they are not opposition because they're not inside of the country. They can't be a party who will take the power right now. Okay, we will see that they are connected, and what? What it could change right now. So, of course, as a media, we are writing about that. It doesn't mean that we are happy to write about that. But we are just, you know, we see this process, we fix it. I mean, we are talking about it, but we cannot push them to be some one political power.
A few words about the possible union or unification of the opposition. Yes, I do think it's rather a question of terminology, and using wrong words gives us wrong ideas. Opposition is a political force or political actors who are striving for power or their share of power, mostly but not exclusively by electoral means. You can't have opposition within the autocracy because there is no legal political competition, nor can you have opposition outside of the country because they are barred from participating in not just any electoral process or any other form of fight for power, but even from taking part in a discussion. By the way, starting September the 1st of this year, a new version of the foreign agents law will come into force, and then it will be virtually impossible, because punishable by law, to even cite or talk to foreign agents in the media. And most of the people who will come to your mind when you think, again, wrongly, but naturally, of Russian oppositional leaders have been labeled foreign agents. So what do we have instead? We have public speakers, we have independent media, we have experts like myself. We are not political actors, because most of us are not striving for power at the moment or planning to do so in the future. Unification sounds great, and it produces good headlines at the moment, but it is neither politically feasible nor, I think, politically possible. In a situation where a great number of secret service departments are actively working with the political immigration, to create a unified structure is just to create an easy target for infiltration, or, well, active measures, as they call it. Look at Belarus. The opposition of Belarus, the political immigration of Belarus, have started earlier than the Russian. They have started their work and life abroad since 2020, and they've been much more organizationally successful than us. This is not to say, look how badly they have failed. They've been successful in many things, like in organizing platforms or self-help or mutual help structures for the Belarusian political refugees. But in terms of creating political structures, not NGOs, not media, not human rights defense organizations, but political structures, well, they have created them, and what has it led to? At the best, symbolic successes. At worst, scandals like the one we are witnessing right now. I don't know if you're watching this, then perhaps you should Google it. I don't want to sound like I'm gloating about it. We have been watching them, anxious for them to succeed, because we wanted to see what practices lead to success in working abroad. Another example of a diaspora that has had even more time to practice its survival is the Iranian political diaspora. It's been out there for decades. And I must say that they have been successful in remaining a political entity visible in the eyes both of their own society and of the governments of democratic West. They exist. That's the most that can be said about it. We are all in more or less the same situation. Russia is not unique. We love to think of ourselves as unique, but really we are not. A lot of countries face dictatorships at certain points of their history. A lot of these dictatorships go to war with their neighbors, because that's what they do. No checks and balances at home, repressions at home, aggression abroad. That's 101 of political science. So a lot of people from these countries find themselves forced to emigrate. They form structures. They try to survive and help each other and remain visible and talk to their compatriots at home. Again, the example of Iran shows us that this work has to be carried on for decades sometimes. But Iranian leadership is aged 80 plus. while ours is just 70 plus, the youngsters, you know, in the prime of life. But when things start happening in Iran, and they will start happening in Iran because their regime has lost the support of especially of the younger demographic strata. Iranian opposition, Iranian political immigration, Iranian anti-regime diaspora will be important. They will play a role. The same applies to the Belarusians and to Russians alike.
Let me close in English for the sake of our guests. I know there are lots of more questions, but our time, unfortunately, is up. So thank you very much, Ekaterina, Maxim, Daria, Ayana, for being here today with us. Thank you for your work, your strength and your courage. Thank you very much. Grazie a tutti e grazie per aver partecipato così numerosi.
Thank you for your hospitality, for your insightful and well thought through questions. It's good to be in an audience that cares about Russia and knows a thing or two about it. So I hope that's not the last time that we have an opportunity of addressing you, well, or of generally speaking from a parliamentary tribune. I would very much love to have this opportunity in my home country, but barring that, I'm always happy to visit the parliament. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
So I want to thank you too, and say if you have any questions more, so we are ready to answer there. Thank you.